Hey, everybody, and welcome again to Out on a Limb podcast, where we have another special guest for you. We have Priscilla Keresey in the house. Woot, woot, we're excited. She is a psychic and medium coming to us from New York, but she also travels the nation, connecting the physical and spiritual worlds for individual clients and groups. And in fact, that's how we met her, because she came down to Charleston to do a group, and we've been friends ever since. She's also a prolific author. She's written 2 books on mediumship, and she's the producer of the Live and Learn series of guidebooks and guided meditations. She's also written 2 books on the importance of recovering our inherent self-esteem. And I can also testify to her books. I've got both of her books on mediumship. They're fantastic. I've also listened to your meditations, and they're wonderful. Help you get into that space of connection. So welcome, Priscilla.
Hey.
Thank you, Allison and Will and Sam.
Welcome.
Yeah, for sure.
So one of the things that we like to do, we have also a psychic medium in the house, and it's fun to hear the differences. But I'd like to hear your background, because if I recall correctly, you were raised Catholic. Is that right? So we're always curious on here how recovering Catholics navigate or reconcile or bridge those 2 ideas, the metaphysical and the religious upbringing. How about talking to us about that and what got you into this realm, this field, how you do what you do?
Well, I had 2 sets of very devout Catholic grandparents. On my dad's side, Irish, so they were pretty much towed the line as far as the sacraments and the Mass. But on my mom's side, kind of old world Polish. So there was a lot of superstition that was in there as well. That was, decidedly not Catholic, but nevertheless accepted as something, sort of spiritual. That's my cat, sorry. Sort of spiritual.
Is that Archie or Reggie?
That's Archie.
Hey, Archie.
So there was always a sort of, my parents kind of fell in between. So we went to Mass every Sunday, and of course we celebrated the Catholic holidays and went through all of the sacraments, the First Communion, reconciliation, confirmation, all of these sorts of things. But there also was a room for a little bit of the superstitious side, the so-called spiritual side, although I don't think my grandmother would have called it that. So I never felt uncomfortable, talking about dreams that I had or feelings that I had, until I became an adult, really. And I started to go to my own, I moved away from my family and continued to go to Catholic Mass myself till I was about 20, my late 20s, and hearing then over and over again that this was, that this was just not done, that who am I to talk to the saints or dead people or anything like, I could be, something evil could have its hooks in me and I wouldn't know because there was no accountability. So I was disappointed, as many people were, in the Catholic Church, and felt like the direction my spirit was taking me, felt it just resonated more. So I have a lot of reverence for the traditional religions and for my upbringing. But for me, I just can't practice them sort of in good faith.
Yeah. That's the story of a lot of us, right? I understand that you are of the mindset that psychic work and mediumship is not a gift per se, but rather a skill that can be learned and developed. And I want to get into that later. But did you notice any of these things when you were a child then, or did they just come in the form of dreams? Or how did you know that you were turned on to all of this?
That's a good question. I the first experience I really remember, and I remember because I had kind of a negative reaction to it, was having a dream that a bridge fell in and cars went in the water. And I was like 13 or 14. And I kind of woke up, I don't know if it was that day or the next day, to the news of a bridge called over the Mianus River in Connecticut, where I grew up, that had collapsed and cars went into the water and people passed away. And I hadn't told anybody about the dream. I think I'd probably forgotten about the dream till I made the connection. And that was kind of upsetting because, like many young people do, we feel like we're responsible for things that happen. And And so that was a very standout experience for me when I was small. And then I just kind of decided that this whole realm just was attractive to me. It felt good to me. I would read books about, fantastic, or not so much science fiction, but sort of, fantasy populations, let's say druids, these sorts of things. And it just fascinated me. And I spent a lot of time in nature growing up, and it just seemed like there was a power there. So I pursued whatever I could as far as reading. This was pre-internet days, as far as what I could find in the library and reading. And the more that I dove into it, the more understanding I had, and the more I recognized that everybody has that within, and the degree to which we explore it would result in our ease of use, our facility of use with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For me, it was just fun. It was just a fun thing to explore the mystery.
Yeah.
It is fun, right? We love it.
Yeah.
And we love talking about all this stuff too, and sharing it with others.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you bring up the fact that this sense that there's something greater or something, not so mystical about being out in the woods, but yet feeling the vibration of, or feeling this sense of something there present in the woods or in nature, and I think many of us feel all of that, but we just don't have the words to put it to. We just go, oh, well, that's interesting. And we just move on with our day instead of just taking that fraction of a moment to kind of lock into it and actually, maybe pull forward something. Or
I don't think we know what we're doing with it, though.
No,
I mean,
but-
at that
and
point, you just know there's something
yeah.
like there.
And I guess it is, to a point, there is some, I hate to use the word instinct, but maybe there is instinct within us that, and might be from past lives, that says, okay, you need to listen a little bit closer, or you need to take a moment here and breathe a little deeper, where some people might not have that instinct and just go, oh, that was interesting. I don't know what that was, but I sensed something, but I don't know what it was. So I'm just going to keep biking, or I'm going to keep walking and not think twice about it. So
Mhm.
I think instinct is a good word, but I also think if that feeling evokes a sort of wonder or a sense of, let me pause for a moment and see if I can, at least, even if I can't articulate it, block it, put parentheses around this moment that I'm feeling different,
mhm.
like a little sidebar of my regular experience out for a walk, or just bustling around doing errands. If we can at least note to ourselves, this feels different, and keep that wonder and that mystery going. So many of us want to explain stuff, that's what the conscious mind wants to do, wants to find patterns and make sense of things. And if we can't, I think a lot of people just dismiss it like, oh, that was weird. And they go on. But if you can get out of that for a moment, just bracket it and say, something feels funny here, or I notice I feel different.
Yeah.
I would go into my imagination.
Yeah.
Just into these wild places that just not scary necessarily. I mean, I think when I was younger, like 5, 6, I think it was scary, but when I would feel that resonance of whatever that is, because I realized I was identifying as you were saying that, but for me, it was just a yearning.
Yeah.
So, just that this feels right. And I couldn't tell what it was. I lived in, part of my formative years was in Southern California. So, all the concrete around you and just the busyness of everything. And so when I had the opportunity to get out in nature,
All right.
I was just like, oh, there's something here. Like it was everything to me.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about, excuse me, pattern recognition. And I think, if we don't journal, we are always speaking about how you need to be journaling your dreams, or journaling weird instances, anything that happens to you, because you really can't recognize patterns sometimes if they're 2 and 3 months apart.
Right.
And there might even be closer, but you miss some things. So when you start to journal, you can look back and you realize how far you've come, or you realize, oh, these are the breadcrumbs.
Mm-hmm.
But also, Priscilla, to your point about the skill development, we were talking about this prior to having you on. And I think, to the degree that somebody becomes a Mavis Patilla, for example, or something like that, these famous Suzanne Giesemann, these mediums that are super evidential
Standouts.
and that stand out,
Yeah.
right? Or the Will's channeling, for example, or whatever it is. I think those types of things are written in our contract and you're not going to be able to miss them. But you're right. Everybody on the planet has this inside. That's who we are. We're part of source and we can develop them. So tell us how, when you teach classes, like what are some key points that you use to help people realize they can do this and to build on that skill?
In my opinion, this is just my opinion, I feel that everybody has equal access to the information in their sixth sense. And what really needs to be developed is confidence in that. Yes. I don't feel like the sense itself needs to be developed. You know, I have physical vision. I can train my vision to pick out, you know, cedar waxwings in the trees, but everybody is capable of looking into that tree and seeing a cedar waxwing there. For example, it's a bird in the Northeast. It's just beautiful. So I think it's the same with our sixth sense. We are exposed or have the exposure to all of that information. And if we train our confidence to go there, to look at it and to look specifically for things, I think that is a skill. Maybe it's like learning a language. Maybe it's learning to recognize, you know, colors of a bird or the sound of a certain instrument in a symphony. You know, if we just have to train the way we're accessing it, but I don't think we need to have some guru touch our forehead or, you know, be initiated into any kind of a rite, you know, and people, that may be wonderful for people who, I don't want to say don't recognize their own power to do that, but if that powerful suggestion allows them to access what's already there, I'm all for it.
Right.
But I don't think anybody needs
authorization.
I don't think you need a guru or a priest or priestess to you know, remove blocks or show you how to do these things. But if you operate best with that kind of authority, I would say do it.
Yeah.
Very true. I agree.
I find that when I'm searching out a mentor, to have someone who can lead me to that experience, like we were talking about with Suzanne Giesman, like some tapes we were listening to, that if you have a good way of leading someone to, or at least someone like me, I'm very kinesthetic, and if I'm led to it and I could feel it one time, I know how to get back there again. Yeah. You know, but it's like you don't know what that thing is until, for me at least, until I touch up against it, and then I'm like, oh, you've been around. I know what you are. And now I know how to go back. And, you know, and do you teach like that? Or
it's so subjective. You know, I can tell people how I see things, you know, clairvoyantly, but you may see things clairvoyantly in a completely different way. So, you know, as a teacher, I can give a couple of examples of what that vision might look like, you know, either to say, you know, what it's like for me, what it looks like for me, what it's unlikely to look like I'm watching a movie. You know, some people do have that experience, but most people, when they access their sixth sense clairvoyantly, it's not like I'm closing my eyes and I have 3 dimensions and, you know, high def, you know, color. You know, it's more like a visual hint of something.
Yeah.
So I think you can only lead someone to their own experience. And when they have their own subjective sense of it to mark it, as you were saying, Sam, like, you know, kind of, oh, I recognize you, or, oh, this feels a little different. And then you can get back there more easily.
Yeah.
So are you saying have you ever categorized in your books or whatever, different types of clairvoyance? Or are you just saying that people perceive it? It's not always that it's explainable, but just people have their own perception.
People have their own perceptions.
Okay. Yeah. I just thought that would be really cool to understand that there's, you know, somebody's been able to categorize the different types of, you know, whatever.
You know, I think that's a good thing, but I think it can also be limiting, because when I was learning about what it meant to tune into my sixth sense, a lot of the books that I was reading at the time were really clairaudient, you know, like listen to what your guide says, or listen to what sound you hear. And I'm not clairaudient at all. So I simply felt like I was failing over and over again. Like, I don't hear anything. And it was only after more reading and understanding, like, well, I can do more than hear. I can feel it, I can see it, it can drop into my mind. And I think, giving people an understanding that there are many different ways that your learning channel or your receiving channel, that information might come through that channel. One is likely to be stronger than others. And if one isn't, as well-rounded as you'd like it to be, you can work on it if you want, or you can just work with what you have. So
Right.
that
Lens too.
Yeah. And I'm in the same camp as you, is that believing that everybody has the ability, whether or not you trust that ability, I can't change that fact in you, but I can lead you to the door. And if you choose to experience what's on the other side of the door, well, then that's your choice. And it is amazing when you have those classes and you do put on a class, and you have the people that are I had several that came to one of my classes that said, I'm just here to support my friend. I don't even believe in any of this stuff.
Those are obnoxious people.
No, but they're the best
They
people,
just go,
because at the end of the class, when they get a full-blown experience, their head explodes. They're like, oh my God, what just happened? So yeah, I love the ones that come to say, I'm just here to support a friend. I don't really believe in all this stuff, but I'm just here to support. And they're the ones that have the most profound experience.
No, I'm saying when you're the other person in the room.
Oh yeah.
And you're trying to learn, and they're the new person, and they just go whoop like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think also there are degrees of perception from, slamming into you and very subtle.
Yeah.
And, I always ask my students, like, take your time. You might not have, such a crystal clear, bam, sense of something. It might be something you've got to untangle a little bit yourself for 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we hear about people whose gut tells them, don't get on that train, or, stay home, don't date that guy, whatever it might be, they tend to describe them as these very dramatic voice from above, or this strong feeling that says, don't do this. And I think probably in hindsight, you do paint it that way. But in my experience, almost every bit of data that comes through the sixth sense is pretty subtle.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
how you respond to it, like when you're learning accessing the sixth sense, or confidence in accessing the sixth sense, you have to take it out of a natural experience, make it really obvious for yourself so that it can fold back into the natural.
Yeah.
So you don't know, people walk through the world, they don't know they're using their sixth sense, but they're using it all the time. If they choose to learn about it, you have to pull it out and put those brackets around it and notice, okay, this is how I feel when I get this hit. This is how I feel when I'm pushing too hard, or when my conscious mind interferes. And then ideally that folds back into your regular day-to-day discernment of things, but you trust it more. Like, if I have 4 errands to do, and I'm just going along with, I have a list of things to do, but I decide, I think I'm going to go to the market first instead of the post office first. And then you find out, somebody came through the post office with a gun or a bomb threat. That's a response to a very natural bit of information that comes through the sixth sense. It's no longer a big slam in the face, like there's a bomb at the post office, don't go there. But we tend to kind of have a natural trust then, especially if we've taken it out and looked at it and examined it and made it very obvious for ourselves. When it folds back into our experience, we find those parking spaces, we show up at the right time, we meet the right people, and we're guided in a way that doesn't seem so obvious. So letting people know, especially students know, this may not be a gigantic, trumpet blare from the sky. You might just be following something and trusting in yourself to follow it. And it's as important as that booming trumpet blast from the sky.
That is so true.
I was going to say, you bring up a good point, and a good friend a mutual friend of ours, Jeanine Clemens, she's the one that told us while we were taking our Reiki class through her, that, when you're driving down the road and you just, you're headed in one direction, but you just get this urge to turn left and you don't know why, turn left. And just those are the smallest little fractions of that sixth sense kicking in. You don't know why you're turning left. You might not even know why you've turned left until you get to that point.
Or you may never know.
Or you may never know. Right. Yeah. You turn left and, maybe 3 days later, you realize why you turned left. But it is listening to that tiny, tiny little voice that's inside.
Okay, it's not always so tiny.
No,
but
no.
For me, I feel it in my kind of gut area. Diaphragm or whatever. And I get this urge, kind of like it's this thing that just feels like this urge, and it's just, I had a really stupid one. It's about 2 years ago, in which I felt like, okay, you need to shave your legs. Come on. Like, I just felt this compulsion, need to shave your legs. I didn't want to do it. I ignored it. And the other urge that I had was I need to clean my shower stall. Again, it was the weekend. I didn't want to do it. And yet it kept coming back. And for me, it's almost like someone pushing me in the back, but it's like a pressure. And I ignored it. And come Monday morning, I slipped in the shower and cut open my leg and had to get a tetanus shot and all this stuff because my shower wasn't clean, and I couldn't shave my leg for several weeks until I got the stitches out. So, it's like, so you can get those
pushes.
So I know that for me, like, I get let's just turn left now. But when I get that urge, if I don't listen to it, I pretty much regret it every time. Like, it's, yeah. So there's degrees too.
There's hell to pay.
Yes.
Can't shave your legs for 6 weeks.
I
Good
know.
grief.
It was summertime.
It's more like, so for me, that's not so much a kinesthetic sort of push, though I tend to be pretty kinesthetic too. For me, it's more mental, where a thought just nags at me, and one example I had a while ago was, I never call in advance to confirm with my clients. I feel like if you're an adult, you should know your schedule, right? So I don't need to babysit people. And are you coming tomorrow? And yet on one Tuesday morning, I felt the need to call someone. I just felt the need to. So I called and I got her on the phone, and or it was like it must have been a Wednesday morning. It was Wednesday morning because Wednesday evening was our appointment at 7. And she picked up, oh, yeah, I'm coming. I said, oh, great. And then, but all throughout the rest of the day, I kept thinking, oh, I did call her. Like, I'd have this little argument in my head. So it wasn't so much an urge, but the thought kept popping up into my mind while I'm making a sandwich, while I'm talking to other clients, while I'm, doing things about my day. Oh, I got to call her. And I tell myself, I just called her. I don't need to call her again. Well, come 7 o'clock, she doesn't show up. And she, when we did get in touch, I thought it was next Wednesday, not today. So, that there was no urgency about it, but for me, it was a mental snag that I could not, put away, even though I logically spoke to myself about it. Look, I called her, and I was having these conversations with myself probably 4 or 5 times throughout the rest of the day. And, if I'd listened to it and called her again, I wouldn't have been waiting around at 7:15 for her to show up or have to change.
It's almost like having her higher self coming over to you, nudging you to remind her because she's not listening to them.
Right.
It can be a, as you were saying, Sam, like a real sense of a push, or it can be more subtle, just like, I can't seem to shake this thought, or I can't seem to shake this feeling without it seeming extreme. Or necessarily leading to something extreme, like falling in the shower and having to have, medical care. It can be something like, a client's blowing you off because she wasn't paying attention. So,
I love how all of this is different for everybody, and it's so important to tune into ourselves, right? So what's fascinating to me when I talk to mediums is how your higher selves, or the spirit beings, or your guides, or whoever it is that trains you during this process, teaches you to distinguish what these messages mean. So I interviewed Priscilla in writing for the book. She's in The Journey Within, in my chapter on mediumship. And it's so fascinating still to this day how you taught yourself. For instance, I think it was, if I see a cake with 1 candle, it means this, or if I see 2 cakes, it means there's maybe 2 birthdays, or they're siblings, or something. I just remember how they taught you the difference between the presentation. Tell us about that.
So for me, because I'm very clairvoyant, it's often like playing charades with the spirit people. I would love it if I were clairaudient and they just gave me a sentence in my ear that said, say this, but more like charades. So when I would have, one thing Mavis Patilla taught me, because I studied under her for a number of years, was whenever you're done with a reading, just whatever you had a little trouble with in the translation, ask the spirit people, in general, the ones you just spoke to, but also in general, I had a little trouble with that. Can you work that out for me on your end?
That is such a good idea.
Yeah, not even in, and Mavis said she did this. She didn't go into a meditation. She didn't, because she knew she didn't have to meditate to talk to the spirit people. She, and I started to do that. And so if I did stumble over something, I'd ask the spirit people, next time this kind of topic comes up, could you make it a little bit easier for me to distinguish what you're talking about? And so if I get a box with a bow on it, I know it means a birthday. If I get 2 boxes with bows on it, I know we're talking about, twins or birthdays that are celebrated together. If the spirit's holding one close and putting one forward, this is my birthday in heaven, and this is your birthday coming up also right around now. So that's how they begin to do things for me. But once I've gotten the feeling behind it, I don't see the pictures quite so much anymore. So now when it comes to, unless I'm missing it, like I had a spirit the other day, given me, for me, a bouquet of flowers means an anniversary. That can be wedding anniversary or anniversary of passing. And I was having a sense like I need to talk about an anniversary because the thought dropped into my mind now rather than having to be paraded in front of me in picture form. But I was also talking about something else, and the spirit gave me this thought. And then finally they just slammed this bouquet of flowers right in front of me. And I was like, okay, I need to talk about an anniversary. So they had dropped the idea into my mind, but because I was picking up on it, but I had set it aside so I could sort of finish what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And the spirit thought the anniversary acknowledgement was more relevant than whatever I was yammering on about. So then here's the picture, stupid. Remember what this means, this symbol right here. So I had a good laugh at them about that. But yeah.
Fascinating.
A very big part of my beginning mediumship. Symbols and pictures were huge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. So I'm curious about, because I find that if I do a group of people, or I'm doing a number of people in a row or whatever, which I don't usually do, I feel like I'm starting to describe, because they start, like I see, I feel the energy, and then they start to fill in, and they fill in more quickly as the person acknowledges. And it's like, how many gray-haired old ladies can you describe, like, and get the person to understand? Like, I just feel like, am I really seeing this now, or am I making this up? Because like, seriously, it's just, they've got their hair done, like they got it done at the beauty shop, and it's, and it's like, I get so many presentations like that, and they'll go, yeah, that's this grandmother, and I'm like, that's kind of going, okay, I feel that there's a feminine presence here. That would be your grandmother, correct? I feel like it's that as broad as that. So to me, I don't know if that's so much of a symbol, but what do you do to get them to start filling in more quickly? Do you or do you ask for distinct things to set you off in a direction?
Well, I don't really ask for anything anymore. I studied with Janet Nohavik too, who's also now in spirit. And she was very much of the school, like, you get the name, rank, and serial number. Ask every spirit to come in with their relationship, their cause of passing, and whatever you felt you wanted to bring through. And I tried that, but for me, that involved my conscious mind too much. And because my subconscious information feels so subtle for me, I was having a little difficulty distinguishing between, if my conscious mind is too much involved, and when I ask myself questions or ask the spirit people questions, my conscious mind wants to fill in an answer and kind of is a little bit louder than the subtle stuff. So I just let the spirit people, I ask them, you come in with your identifying characteristics. And sometimes it will begin with, I know this is your mother's mother because she's standing in a certain place. Or I have a man in the spirit world who was a school teacher, and he's giving me, scoliosis or something. So I never know what they're going to bring. And I do ask them to give me their gender, but they don't always. Right. Especially when it comes to some of the younger people who come in, they seem to want to talk more about their personalities or how they passed, especially when it comes to when there are sadly so many overdose youngsters in the spirit world. And, you know, they don't want to come in with the overdose, or they don't want to come in right away with their gender. They want to come in and talk about how they were a DJ, or how they noticed somebody made t-shirts about their passing to honor them, or put up a cross on the side of the road where they passed away. So I think it's better for me to let the spirit people announce themselves in whatever order they can connect with me, and then with whatever evidence that they feel is important to put forward. And it's funny, Sam, you bring that up, because sometimes people will say to me that my sitter will say to me, well, I don't think she'd come through. That sounds like my mother, but I don't think she'd come through saying that. Or he wouldn't come through with that. He wouldn't come through talking about his cause of passing, because, you know, and you're like, all right, well, what about the other 9 bits of evidence? Do those match? So
exactly.
Yeah, you have to like
expectations.
Okay, so here's something, and it was really cool because I understood this when I did a session, like a handoff session with Will, and the idea that a spirit could piggyback with another spirit to come in to give information, and that happened during that session, and I'd never experienced that before because I'd only done sessions for one person at a time, and so after that, I started having that happen. A lot, even just like with one person, it would be describing these 2 people. And then I did a group session not too long ago, and almost every single one of them, they were pigging back off. And then I had to separate them, going, okay, but this detail applies to this, and this detail applies to that. Right. But I think it was, I won't say a famous psychic. I just shouldn't say names. But anyway, who said, oh no, that can't happen. Only one can come in at a time. And I'm like, okay, but I'm experiencing them piggybacking. So what is your take on that?
I have that often too, especially when I'm doing a group, and especially if I'm doing a group where everybody's paid and maybe not everybody's going to get read. So, you know, I've had a similar famous psychic say things like, you know, one spirit can't belong, the one message for one person. So even if someone else in the audience goes, you know, it sounded just like my grandmother, but you were talking to him, but it sounded just like her, and he could take everything, but I could also take everything. And the message was also relevant for me. This famous psychic that I know would say, no, the spirit only shows up for one person. So you have to tell that person, no, you can't take any of that.
Was this a male psychic?
That doesn't sound very healing. So,
yeah. I'm just like, what the?
Yeah,
about that. And I've experienced the piggybacking too. And my theory about it, or my sense that the spirit people have given me is like, look, we've only got so much time. You've got an hour and a half here. There's 40 people in the audience. You want to read as many people as we're as excited to talk to our loved ones as our loved ones are excited to hear from us. So, you know, if I have something in common with this other spirit, even though we've never met each other, or you guys in the audience have never met each other, we're going to help each other and come through so that both of these people can hear a message or evidence of their loved one. So I'm all for it, I think.
Because like you said, the point is that it's healing. Mediumship is so healing for people, especially those that are grieving. And so if both of those people can claim that and feel good and feel healed and better when they left, why would you discourage that? That makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And what also sometimes if there's piggybacking, and, you know, somebody, and even if I'm talking to someone, say right in front of me, and someone over there in the back right also can take everything. What I don't want to have happen is the person in front of me going, oh, it must be for them, then not for me.
Yeah.
I know, and I hate when they do that.
I want you both to take it. If you can take everything that I'm saying, and you can take everything that I'm saying, both take everything that I'm saying. The spirit people are helping each other.
Yes.
They're doing it to reach both of you. So just because another person can also take it, they're not hijacking your reading, and they're not taking anything away from your experience here. So I think people get a little gun shy about that in the living world as well.
Yeah.
My understanding with that, though, is that sometimes they do that because either one of the spirits is a little shy or not quite as energetically capable as pushing towards the front. So they kind of piggyback onto another, or one is a little bit nervous, or perhaps a grandfather will introduce a child or something like that.
I think that happens as well, you know, and you know, that game, that card game, Go Fish, you know, where, you know, I either need a club or a two, and the next spirit in line's like, well, I've got a club, well, I've got a two, and so we have just even a little bit in common, whether it's the name, and only if I'm talking to George here and I have another George behind me who's got nothing at all physically like the one, I'm talking to now, but that George may come through, or the father may come through with the son or something like this. But
so you just said about the name. I'm curious, do you get names? And also, because like I don't, I mean, it's rare that I would get a name. And is it just because it's your style, how things are set up, just that, I mean, because I know some people get names, I just don't. And I cannot figure out why that is.
Well, first, as my fellow hypnotist, Allison would tell you, stop saying that. No more negative self-suggestions, please.
Yeah.
But also,
Totally noted.
for me, because I don't trust my clairaudience very well, because it's not at the moment my strongest, and I haven't taken much time to develop it. I often will see the face of a saint or a celebrity or somebody I know. So if I see Frank Sinatra, I know I either need to talk about a man who's got a very beautiful singing voice or the name Frank. And I'll pause a little bit and see which one stands out for me more. But that's generally how I get names. Sometimes they're just dropped into my head, and I don't have a particular visual reference for them. And that tends to happen when I really have a very good connection with the spirit, where my conscious mind is really out of the way, and I'm just talking, and they're talking about their bowling trophies, and they're talking about this, and they're talking about, Habitat for Humanity, and oh no, they're showing me the name, Stewart, and then, it just sort of flows out with everything else.
Yeah.
But if someone says, do you get a name or do you get initial, it's all over. Forget it. That's my conscious mind's in there going, what could his name be?
Interesting.
I agree with that. Names are not, over prolific in my sessions, but and the way I look at it is it's another layer of that skill I haven't developed to really fully listen into the nuance of what's coming in, because it's there. They're just showing it in a way that I haven't quite fully perceived yet. But if a name needs to drop in, it is just like you said, it's there. Whether I hear it, whether I say it, it's just an audio thing that comes through. It's purposeful.
Without anything like this. And I think, what I need to do a little bit more of, and maybe all of us do here, is just ask the spirit people, I'd like to do this. I'd like to give this to people. So you guys work out how to get this to me, whether it's sandwiched in between information that's flowing easily. Because, the names, it's so fraught with, I don't know, they're so weighty, because you can describe everything about the person. And, and the person in the physical world might go, yeah, but if you only got their name, or something like this. I think, this is your dad, for example, but, you didn't say the name. And I think people really, really like to hear that.
But I also wonder, is it that they're in spirit form and they just don't identify with that as much? I mean, I wondered if that was it, but maybe it's just that it's so weighty in the moment that it comes out of my mouth and it's incorrect. Then I'm like, okay, well, I've lost, even though everything else could match up, but because
or if you hear it incorrectly and you say it wrong, that might discredit everything else that you've given them that they did agree. I mean, names can be misinterpreted or mispronounced, or maybe they're hard to say,
but not.
Yeah.
If I get anything, I'll tell people I can get close. Like it sounds like a John, like that. And that's, hey, I'm doing great when I do that.
One of the things that I did that you might find helpful is I started asking spirit people to give me, because when I was working on getting names, more specifically, not too long ago, to give me the name of somebody in the living world connected to you. And that's less weighty. So if I'm talking with someone who always wore flannel shirts, and I've got all this other evidence, and the person is certain that that's their dad, let's say, and then I say, I want to connect him with a name like Elizabeth. Oh, that's his wife, my mom.
Okay.
She's in the living world. Okay, they're just giving more evidence of their continuity of life. You know, sometimes I'll ask them to show me, if not their profession, the profession of someone in the family. You know, somebody in the family they're showing me is in education as a teacher. Oh yeah, my sister just got a new job as a teacher. You know, and that can be as tying together, because it lets people know that my dad and spirit, for example, he's still part of the family. He still knows what's going on in the family. So sometimes if the connection isn't really great, I ask the spirit people, and maybe they're just triggering my psychic sense, or maybe they're giving it to me. I don't know. But, you know, tell me about the person sitting across from me or their family, and that will convey still loving involvement from the person in spirit.
Yeah.
I don't want to gloss over something you said about the way we speak, about our skill set and so forth. And you said it beautifully, and I'm guilty of this as well, but you said clairaudience is not my strongest suit at the moment, and I haven't had time to practice, or something like that.
Instead of I just don't get it.
Rather than I don't do that, or I'm not good at that, or that's not my thing, or whatever. At the moment, it may not be your strongest, correct? And giving credence to the fact that you could practice that or develop that. I like that a lot.
I'm writing it down.
And you mentioned psychic. So I want to bring up the difference between psychics and mediums, or receiving information psychically versus mediumistically. Tell us your view on that.
Some people are super invested in that.
Yeah. In the end, I don't think it makes a difference. You know, I don't think it, I mean, I think it's important for me to know where it's coming from, but I don't think it makes it less valid if I'm pulling the name Elizabeth, who just got a job as a teacher, out of the psychic arena while I'm talking to dad in the spirit world. I think, you know, all aspects of the one mind are working together to bring healing to a person. So if you're going to split hairs, okay. But for me personally, I don't care. So for me, psychic information is using my present sixth sense in the physical world here to connect with my sitter in the physical world, to talk about the physical world.
Right.
And spirit people, mediumship is, you know, we could talk about the physical world, but the information is not coming from the person sitting across from me, but from the person in the spirit world.
Yeah.
And so
I
some
kind of noticed that when it's mediumistic, it seems to be over here on my right side. And when it's psychic, it seems to be over here on my left side. And I only noticed that doing Zoom readings.
Wow.
And I'd be talking to people, and I'd be like, had my head tilted this way as I'm connecting, or even looking this way, because I do a lot with my eyes closed. So I might be looking this way. And then I'll say, I'm going to go over to psychic for a moment. And I notice myself kind of going over here. But now that I've seen it, and I ask the spirit people, if you want to keep doing this, just make it a little more obvious for me, so I know for my own self. If you feel I need to say this to, you know, the sitter, fine. But, you know, just for my own. And so it's been pretty clear for me since then.
Awesome.
I think what I understand as the reason that people get hung up on this is because if they come into a mediumship reading and they're thinking of connecting with their grandfather, they have the grandfather's face, name, everything about the grandfather's information in their field, the psychic field, and they come and sit with you. People get hung up about you pulling that out of their psychic field psychically versus actually connecting with the grandfather and speaking to the grandfather. And they feel like it's not valid if you didn't connect with grandfather. And to me, I'm not sure that it makes a difference, but there are some schools of thought that it does.
Well, that same famous psychic, poor Allison had to deal with me going into like a complete identity crisis. Like I even pulled, I mean, like I did a disclaimer underneath my mediumship work saying some information could be obtained psychic. Like it threw me into such a thing. And she's just looking at me going, does it matter?
Don't put your faith in gurus. You have to trust yourself.
Yeah.
What say you, Priscilla?
Well, I think it can be easily resolved by the spirit people, first of all, by bringing in additional people that aren't the grandfather they're thought about. And, you know, and if it's a concern of yours, asking the spirit people, look, if somebody comes in with this, give me a little bit more. Give me something that either that they can't validate at the moment, or that, you know, that they don't remember, or they haven't thought of, that wasn't in their mind about that.
Yeah, I get pictures like there is like a very distinct picture of them standing in front of a car, you know, and they've got their hand on it and they're very, like, they just have this very proud moment, but it's a specific, and the more I describe it, the more I can see the car. And that's like what the impression they're putting in my mind. And then that person has to go and find it, you know, and sometimes it takes them a little bit, you know, but they'll come back and tell me, oh my God, like, how did you know? It's like, because they told me.
And I've also been working a lot more on like emotional messages from spirit, because I've been the sort of person who, you know, I don't have a rich emotional field because of my upbringing. I had to kind of put a nice wall around. I had to dissociate quite a bit. Emotional vulnerability was, you know, didn't feel very safe for me for a long time. So when I work with the spirit people, I'm asking them to give me, because everybody wants a message, right? And I thought, yes, I love you. Yes, this, yes, that. And then, you know, the psychic thing, you've got a new job as a teacher, maybe that comes in. But I thought, you know, it's really important if I can get maybe a more robust or intimate message if I can ask the spirit person for like the dominant emotion that they're feeling. So when I ask the spirit people to do that, again, in general, I don't ask during the setting because then I'm going to be waiting consciously for a feeling to come through. But one of the general things I sort of throw out there when I'm not doing a reading, and now I'll get a very strong emotion, one that might be regret, or that might be, I drove a wedge between my children. I told them different stories. And I found that in that emotion, that's where the message is. And, you know, the emotion, of course, they're going to come through with love, because in the spirit world, we've dropped our ego and our, you know, all the us versus them stuff. But and so love is the primary feeling there. But as far as a message goes, you know, if it's longing or having to say goodbye, like, and there's such nuance. So I'm learning also about, there's a lot of healing for me because I'm learning about an emotional range that I haven't allowed myself to really experience. You know, when I was growing up, things were either bad or good. I was either mad or happy, or sad or happy. There wasn't all these layers like betrayal and, you know, hurt feelings, like all of these subtle nuances and emotions that are so rich with stories that if you can understand more about emotions yourself, you can really give a very nuanced message and understanding. And I think that's not something that a person can pick up psychically too. So that's another thing I think if a medium can bring through, even if someone goes in there with name, rank, and serial number of their granddad, but then they talk about, you know, the medium talks about how granddad felt so helpless when his son went off to Vietnam and, you know, came home a different person. And, you know, those are things that I think people don't come in with it expecting a certain emotion from a spirit person.
And those tend to be the most healing. That is really the heart-centered stuff. Before we step away from psychic, I do want to give a shout out to Priscilla, because before we met at a mediumship circle here in Charleston when you came down for one of your visits. But prior to that, you had this thing, I don't know if you still do it, but you had this thing where you could write, I think it was 3 questions, and you would answer them psychically. And you did that via email. You did not know me yet.
Right.
And the 3 things that you said still are blazed in my memory because they came true. 2 of them came true. The other one I know will. One of them was that I would not only write it, I asked about my authorship. I had not written a book yet. You said, yeah, you're going to write a book, but not just one. You're going to write several, which I have. And you're going to publish other people's books. I'm like, ain't no way I'm going to publish. How would I do? I don't even know the first thing about publishing. Are we publishing? Yes, we're publishing. And the third thing is that, yes, I'll be able to step away from my job, my education job. But what will happen is that something else will be developing in the meantime, such that you'll be able to step away in 4 to 5 years or so. And it'll be just like stepping off, in this cushion that you've created will already be there, like the treehouse, perhaps, like our metaphysical work, right? It's probably 6 years now, and that hasn't quite happened, but I know that it will, because we've created this.
It just hasn't happened yet.
We're ready to step into it. I know it's going to happen. Yeah. So your psychic ability is on point to say something as crazy as I'll publish books, which is where did that come from? Right. Anyway, I love telling that story. It's just so fun for me.
And your books are great, I have to say. I've read
Thank
them.
you. Thank you. You have another one before I move? I want to
have
hit
one
another
more
topic before.
Burning question. Because this is like, okay. And you have all these tips in your books, right? Because I'm buying one of your books. Well, because it's organizing me so much. I love this, but this is a beef of mine that I'm just curious, because I know you guys have shifted some of the stuff that y'all have done, but when people come in and like, it's very clear, I actually removed psychic and medium as a choice and instead said guidance or connection. Because I'm really trying to get it across to people. Are you coming to connect with someone who's crossed over, or is it that you're seeking guidance? And they will come in to connect with someone, but they want guidance from that person. And I'm like, I personally, like, if that's what they want, fine. But then I counsel them, because to me, going to their higher self, going to spirit guides, they know what their plan is. And it's like, why would I go to your uncle that was your favorite uncle? That doesn't make sense to me. So that's just a me thing. And I'm curious, like, because I know you guys started going to a person's higher self, and this doesn't have to do with mediumship versus, but you found that it's very constructive to go to the higher self. So what do you say to that? Like,
I used to have like either or, but now I tell people, like, when people sit down in front of me, I'm like, is there something I should look at psychically? You need insight on, or are you interested in connecting with the spirit people? And then I say, most people want a little bit of both. And they're like, oh, a little bit of both. So that's why I'm able, that helps me kind of distinguish this. And I can even say to the person, and sometimes I do if I feel it's relevant, as your dad is talking to me in spirit, he's stirring up something in my psychic side that I want to just dip into, and that's about a job that's coming up for you, or whatever that might be. And so I can literally feel the information pipeline sort of slow from here, but then pick up from the other side. So I don't distinguish so much anymore. And I would agree with you, Sam. I think, and I've told, my sense is, your favorite Uncle Joe in the spirit world, he might not know anything about, your dreams, or your, just because they're in heaven doesn't mean they've suddenly become all knowing, it's just, and maybe they are, but they're coming through evidentially to show you that life goes on. And that's a whole different, thrust of connection than to tell you about the spirit world and what you can expect when you get here. So I think I kind of just mash it all together now.
Yeah. And I'll say the same thing. And I haven't done a personal session, psychic medium personal session in quite a while, but before that, the last 6 clients, they all signed up for a mediumship session as soon as they sat in a chair and we started talking. They're like, well, I don't know, maybe I said, okay, we're going to blend it together and we're going to just have a fun time with it. And it ends up being just an astonishing reading, because it just like that, you get some mediumship information coming in, it settles it all self in. And then all of a sudden for me, it becomes a big whiteboard on the floor, and everything starts drawing itself out on the floor. All the psychic information starts drawing itself out on the floor, and just becomes a beautiful session after that. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yesterday with a woman, just on the phone. So, and I'd never done a reading for her before. And she wanted to talk about conceiving. She and her husband were having trouble conceiving. And so I told her what I saw. And then I said, I need to bring in a woman from the spirit world. I don't remember who it was. And she came in with all her evidence. And my client on the phone said, she also had a lot of trouble conceiving. So I think the spirit person who could identify with the client's issue came in to support her, came in to mix what was supposed to be purely psychic, as she asked for. It was just half an hour of psychic stuff. She told me what it was going to be about, and I don't like that in advance. I'm like, don't tell me. But she had told me what it was about. So when her spirit person came in, both of us were a little bit surprised, but then she could make the connection that she had a team on the other side that identified her struggles and would be there for inspiration or for help, or, just think about me and, I'll bring whatever healing I can bring.
Awesome.
So I feel like we'd be remiss if we don't ask this question, because it's on a lot of people's mind. And that is, how do you teach your clients when they're opening up to the field, to the quantum field, to this mediumship or psychic ability, that they don't connect with negative energies, attachments, demons, any of the other baddie stuff that they don't want? How do you filter for that? How do you teach people about that? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I might be alone in the field here with this. I don't happen to believe in any of that. So that's my experience. You know, people have argued with me like, yeah, but I had this experience, or I had, okay, that's fine. But I just don't go there. I don't go there personally. I don't believe that anything negative has any volition of its own. If we are, we can have negative experiences or seemingly evil, disruptive experiences, or meet people like that. But my sense is they're just, for whatever reason, they have retreated from where the real power is, which is in light and love and the creator source, whatever you want to call it. But I don't feel that evil has volition, like darkness has no volition of its own. You know, there's this famous saying, you can't walk into a room and flip the dark switch on. You know, what you do is you turn out the lights for it to become dark. So if people come to me with questions like that about, you know, before our reading, I give them my point of view. If they argue with me about it and they want to continue, I'm not trying to convert anybody, but, you know, if I'm trying to say in a reassuring way that they're never going to have an experience like that with me, because it's simply not allowed. It's not allowed because it's not in my vernacular at all. So I wouldn't even have such an experience. Right. But if people want to bring it in, I adapt, you know, and I was like, well, how would you feel most protected? Would you like to put a white light around yourself? You know, how would they like to feel most comfortable? Especially as they're learning. You know, people often say, well, I need to kind of, you know, if I'm going to open a circle, I should close it. Well, yes, if you're going to open a circle, maybe you should close it. But I think it's a matter of switching, you know, the station we're listening to. So if I'm listening to you in the 3D rational world and I'm going to go to mediumship, I'm just switching the station. I'm still getting the information in, but it's not coming from my own five senses now. Right. And when I want to go back to my five senses, I just switch it off. You know, nobody in the spirit world follows me anywhere. You know, they can't stay attached. They can't continue to direct me to do something I don't want to do. So that's what I try to convey to people.
I love that. And the reason that I love that is twofold. The first thing you said was that you do on some level have to take the client or the person that's in front of you from where they're coming from. You have to entertain it from where they're coming from. So when we had conversations at the beginning of all of this, and we talked to his team, Archangel Raphael, Michael, all of those about this, I said, are we doing a disservice to our client who presents with these things? They have an attachment or they have whatever it is. Are we doing a disservice if we pretend that it doesn't exist? Because at that time it wasn't in our realm either. And we just didn't think it existed, but they thought it did. And so they said, entertain their thought because their conscious mind is also engaged. So if you bring in Archangel Michael, he said, bring me in and I'll sword him off and I'll, you know, get rid of it and we'll send it to the light and whatever. And you've at least done something that their conscious mind can grab onto, right? So that's the first thing. And the second thing is it's all it's just energy. And the reason that it feels weird is if you're vibrating here and this lower vibrational energy hits you, it's going to feel yucky or evil, or it's going to feel weird.
Or it's going to create a dissonance, you know, people who get scratches.
But it's how your mind interprets that and what labels you put on it. So like you said, it's all about labeling and verbiage, really.
It's just misunderstood energy.
And we can have that with regular people in the world too. You know, you can walk into someone who just puts you off, you know, or they don't have to say anything. It can just be their posture or something much less obvious, like they're steaming mad because they've had a bad day, and you know, you could never tell visually, but the vibe they're giving off is drags you down, you know, and it's a thing, it's real, but does it have power to attach itself to you or to I personally don't believe it's a separate thing. I think, but again, that's my opinion, and who am I? I'm just a humble person who's trying to make the best sense of the mystery that I can in order to serve my clients, and I know that's always evolving. So I'm trying I always try to say, in my opinion or in my experience, because the fact is we're never going to know truly until we get there ourselves what the spirit
Right.
world is.
Yes.
And several things can be true at once. A lot of us have, we all have 8 billion different perspectives, and they're all right.
Yeah.
So wrapping our head around that one, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, how can people find you? Are you doing Zoom readings and in person? And how does that work?
Yep, I do readings virtually. So by Zoom, FaceTime, Skype, WhatsApp, regular phone, also in person. I do have a mailing list. I don't even put anything out monthly, only if I'm going to be, or, you know, I don't send out a newsletter, but rather what my events will be in the upcoming month. If I'm going to Louisiana or, you know, Santa Barbara, California, or wherever I might be going. So people can kind of follow me by giving me their email addresses, but I'm at apracticalpsychic.com on the web. And also Facebook, A Practical Psychic.
What was that?
And also on Facebook, A Practical Psychic.
Perfect. I didn't want to talk over you.
That's a great name.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so suitable.
My sense is, what if it can't be of any practical value for you in your life? You know, for me and my audience, you know, I'm like aiming towards the bridge, the people who want to believe. You know, I don't want to preach to the choir, I guess, is where I am. So, you know, for me, bringing a very grounded and practical set of, you know, insight or guidance from a maybe like New Age or woo sort of place, you know, at least I can give people confidence in their own ability to suss things out. Because so much of what people say to me, and probably to you guys as well, is, you know, when you say something to them like, yeah, that was my thought too, or that I felt that way too. And people just often need validation. And so if you can come at their stuff, the practical things they're dealing with, you know, it's a whole nother audience of people who have worked out a lot of self-awareness and are already following their you know, their subconscious mind, or they know their stuff, and they want to explore Akashic records or find it a deeper meaning, or they're ready to you know, attend to a deeper meaning in their lives, rather than just, you know, how do I keep myself from strangling my spouse, you know, and getting enough money for the end of the day? You know, what practically can I do with that, or deal with a sister who won't speak to me, or these sorts of things that people bring some healing to their day-to-day lives. I think it then frees them up for the next, like the graduate level professors, to take them from a healed place, and then they can explore more with even more confidence, past lives or channeling from the angels or the ascended masters or that sort of thing. I feel like I'm sort of like the middle school psychic medium. You know, let me get you on your feet here. and so that has to be very practical and very grounded.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like
It's
that.
very true.
I like that so much.
Well, gosh, like I thought, the hour flew by with you, Priscilla. We're so thankful. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I'll be back down to Charleston soon. I'm hoping to come down in the fall. So
Awesome.
Sounds fantastic. And we will put your contact information in the description below. And thank you so much to our audience for tuning in to another episode of Out on a Limb podcast. Until next time.
See you guys.
Bye.